So by reading Scripture, we plant seeds in our life. We plant seeds for the gospel. We plant seeds for Christ-like life. We create the right conditions to grow in our faith. But how do we know things are progressing? How do we know that we are becoming more like Christ? How does this growth materialize? Paul writes to a group of churches, and sometimes he writes to cities and towns, but this time he writes to almost like a region, a state called Galatia. In the book of Galatians, in this letter to the Galatians, he writes about the fruit of the Spirit. And he says, this is what the Spirit ought to exhibit in our life. It is how it is manifested. This is how it shows itself in our life. And what's interesting about that phrase is that fruit is singular. So we can't just pick out one or two or three. We can pick out the ones that are easy, the ones that we prefer. They are all to be exhibited as evidence of the Spirit in our life. And the list goes like this. It's love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, and self-control. And it says there is no law against these things. Coming up here in a couple of weeks, we're going to begin a series in our worship services where we're going to be going through the fruit of the Spirit. How can we be more fruitful in our life? How can we display these marks of being a Christian? How can we show our faith in these ways? By exhibiting these fruit. Are we becoming more loving? To those who are, not those who are like us, those that we like, but those who are different than us, those who we don't necessarily agree with, those who might rub us the wrong way. Do we show them love? Or do we live a life of joy? Even in difficult times, do we exhibit kind of an inner satisfaction with the faith that we have, with the God who we love, with our life? Do we exhibit this joy, this internal kind of happiness? Do we live a life of peace? Do we make peace with those who are around us? Do we live a life that displays peace inwardly, peace outwardly? And we can go on down the list that these fruit are exhibited in our life. I often find in my life that the more time I spend in Scripture, the more time I spend with God, the more time I'm in prayer, the more time I'm thinking and dwelling on the things of God, it's easier for these to be made real in my life. It's easier for these to be real, the reality of my life. But the more time I spend away from Scripture, the more time I try to do things on my own, the more time I'm focused on my inward world and not on the life that God wants to create in me, then I find these things more difficult. I don't have as much self-control. May lose my temper more quickly. I might not have the patience that I want to have with those around me. I may not be as gentle or kind. My actions may not be as good as I want them to be. But the more time I find myself walking in step with Jesus, the more mature I see myself growing, the more I produce these fruit in my life. And it's interesting how just a daily routine of reading Scripture, of pondering on what it means for me and my life and those around me, and those few moments a day of just stopping and resetting myself, of centering myself on Christ, that begins to make a world of difference on down the line. And maybe you'll find that true for you as well. So I hope today as you begin your day, that you'll stop and you'll take a few moments and center yourself on Christ and His words found in Scripture, that He may lead and guide you today. Know that I love you and I'm praying for you, and I hope we get to see you real soon.